Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webcast. My name is Christine Dorsey Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio chapter of the American Planning Association, and I am your webcast moderator. Today is Friday, December 4th, and we will hear the presentation, The Avant-Garde Staff Report. For technical help during today's webcast, you can type your questions in the chat box found in your GoToWebinar tool panel. And for your content questions related to the presentation, again, just type those in the chat box and we will answer those at the end of the presentation during the Q&A. Coming up next on your screen is a list of our sponsoring APA chapters and divisions for 2020. Thanks to all of those participating for making these webcasts possible and free to members. Today, we are sponsored by APA Kansas, so thanks to them for sponsoring our session, and we look forward to it. Coming up on your screen now is a list of our upcoming webcasts. This is it now for 2020. Head over to ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast, and you can register for all of those sessions. Believe it or not, we're already booking into February and March of next year, so be sure to stay tuned. This is where we post all of our sessions for you to register for. Today's webcast has been approved for 1.5 CM credits for live viewing. To log those credits, just head over to planning.org, log into your MyAPA account, and from there you can either search by today's title or event number, both of which can be found again on our webcast webpage, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. Be sure to like us on Facebook, just search Planning Webcast Series and we'll pop up. That's where I post any important information like date or time changes, or when we have new sessions that are up on our website for you to register for. So be sure to like us. And we also record all of our sessions. We post them onto our YouTube channel. So head over to YouTube and be sure to subscribe to us so that you get notifications when we post our new sessions. We have over 300 videos, over 3,100 subscribers. So be sure to join us so that you get notifications when new sessions are available. That is the end of my housekeeping. Again, be sure to type your questions into the chat box in the GoToWebinar tool panel, and I'll organize those and get them all ready for our Q&A at the end of today's session. Oh, I'm sorry, and we'll also have a PDF copy of the slide decks available on our webcast webpage, along with the recording on YouTube. All right, now that's really the end of my housekeeping items, so I'm going to turn it over to Bonnie Johnson, who's going to kick us off today.
Okay, thank you, Christine. So let me show my screen. And so, Christine, are we good to go?
We are good to go. And just
Okay,
also
great.
so everyone knows, Bill is also on the line, our second speaker, but he's having trouble with his camera, so he's just sort of the ghost in the background, but he is here with us also.
Bill is here.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Thank you. Okay, well, hello and thank you all for oh, and Christine, is that it still looks okay?
Yeah, everything looks great.
Okay, great. All right. So thank you all for tuning in today. You can see on the screen who we are, and Bill is out there coming to us from Topeka. And we're hoping you will all come along with us and accept the challenge of rethinking staff reports. So both Bill and I have written a lot of staff reports. I've written staff reports in my 8 years as a practicing planner. And then as an urban planning professor, I teach students how to write staff reports. But really my thoughts about staff reports really started to crystallize when I was a planning commissioner here for the Lawrence, Kansas, Douglas County Metropolitan Planning Commission. And I would dutifully read my packet, read all the staff reports. I would go drive by the sites, and I would discover that even though I had a master's degree in urban planning and had been a practicing planner, that I was still confused about what was going on. And I thought, oh my goodness, if I'm having trouble with these staff reports, then what is other people who don't have my credentials doing with these staff reports? So I thought maybe this is something that we need to take a closer look at. So today I'm going to show you the results of two research projects. One where I looked at actual staff reports from across the country, and then the other is where I used what I call the avant-garde staff report to try to jumpstart some new thinking about staff reports. And I used planners and planning commissions as focus groups to see what they think and to see if we can rethink staff reports. And one of those focus groups was the City of Topeka's planning staff and planning commission. And so Bill will be able to tell you a little bit about his experience with rethinking staff reports. So here we go. So just to make sure that we're all on the same page on what staff reports are, this is a definition from the literature. So these are the reports a professional planner prepares that digest a particular development proposal or permit request, assess site conditions, relate the proposal to the comprehensive plan, subplans, and functional plans, and make a recommendation, all against the backdrop of local government policies and development code criteria. So that's what we're talking about. But first off, I want you to think about what one word do you think of when you hear staff report? What just immediately comes to mind? Well, I actually asked this question when I gave a presentation about staff reports at the National Planning Conference in 2017. And the planners in the audience texted me words, their one word, and then I created a word cloud out of those. So here's what a room full of planners at the National Planning Conference said when they hear staff report. So boring was the big winner here. And UGG came in pretty close behind boring. But you can see where there's a need for them because they're informative, they're comprehensive, they're educational, they're essential. But there's a lot of, maybe they're not the greatest things in the world to read or to prepare. So maybe there's something that we can do to make this better. My first research project into staff reports was in collecting actual staff reports from cities all across the US. And here you can see a map of where I got all the different staff reports. And then, so it was 94 cities. I asked for a staff report that was a simple rezoning. I got responses from cities in 41 states, from small towns to very big cities. And those very simple rezoning staff reports ranged from 1 page to 71 pages. And then I worked with a colleague, Ward Lyles here at the University of Kansas, and a team of graduate research assistants, and we read all those staff reports. And here's what we found. We used a scorecard on whether they were a more traditional, very rational staff report or more of a modern and communicative or easy to read staff report. And we charted them on a table. And you can see where there weren't very many of the staff reports that hit on both being a good style, meaning easy to read, and also had substance. So there were very few that were like, yeah, this is a great staff report, easy to read, yet I'm still getting the information I need. And we had some that were neither style nor substance, and a whole lot in between. But it really did show where these reports were a lot of technical writing for, a lay public, for planning commissioners or for citizens. And so here's a little bit more behind what we found. Not all of them even reference the comprehensive plan. Not all of them gave a recommendation. And this is where I discovered that there are some cities where their planning commissions don't allow their staffs to give a recommendation. Not all really used maps very well. And not all of them even used basic navigational devices like page numbers or used things like bullet points or photographs. And only 1% used sidebars. So there's room for improvement. And then here's just some examples of what we found. A cover sheet is a good idea in case you don't look, in case you, meaning planning commission or citizen, doesn't look at anything else. Good to have a cover sheet with basic information. Here's another example of a cover sheet that even has the recommendation and a proposed motion on the front page. Here's one that the map isn't the greatest, but it's at least a map on the cover page. Tables, making good use of tables. This was different. They had on the cover page, well, here's an issue that is going to come up. So, be alert. Literally a checklist in the staff report. A map that shows the whole city, but then where is the site? That was a little unusual. And then, like I said, sidebars really weren't used very much. So that's just, a little bit of what we saw out there. And so I started thinking about my next research project. How can we maybe reimagine staff reports? So I was lucky enough to get funding through the University of Kansas's Spencer Museum of Art. They had a thing called the Integrated Arts Research Initiative funded by the Mellon Foundation. And through this effort, the museum was seeking to see if researchers like me, that's used to collecting data, analyzing it, and writing about it, to see if researchers like me could realize that the process of making art is also research. So I set to work on trying to see if I could come up with a process that would break us out of our old-fashioned ways of viewing staff reports. So we need to think differently. Can staff reports be avant-garde? Now, stay with me here. To get out of our staff report rut, we need to think differently. For myself, I love watching creative people work, and that means I'm a fan of reality TV shows like Project Runway or Top Chef. On Project Runway, fashion designers compete each week to create fashion that judges think is innovative, easy to manufacture, and easy to sell. People will want to buy these things. The competition often asks the designers to design something that is avant-garde, to get them to think of something new and to experiment. And avant-garde means, like what you see on the screen, that the garments might not really be wearable. Sometimes the models can barely walk down the runway, but they inspire ready to wear. And so here is something that you can buy on Walmart's website. But you can see where the avant-garde pieces inspired this, that somebody can go out and purchase at Walmart today. So I thought, why can't we do the same thing with staff reports? We can start with avant-garde, not very practical staff reports, but use them to inspire real-world effective staff reports. And I'm defining avant-garde as new, unusual, or experimental ideas. So let's do some rethinking of staff reports. So I started with fashion thinking and design thinking. In design thinking, they often use what's called a style board, where you create a board that shows, let's say you're wanting to redesign a teapot, for example. You will do a style board showing all sorts of different kinds of teapots that are out there, just to kind of explore what's out there. So I did a style board of staff reports, and I put it in the framework of fashion thinking. So these are all actual staff reports, but the framework is what fashion designers often do as their starting point for designing something new. What they do is they look to the past. So what was stylish like in the 1950s or the 1920s? Can I get some inspiration there? What is streetwear? What is it that the average person is wearing on the street? Look to the future. What's futuristic out there? And they also look to the elites, because fashion designers really do want to sell to elites because they've got the money. And so that's what they use for inspiration. But what I found in the looking at the styles of staff reports was that even the elite ones from bigger, more resourced, well-resourced cities, were really not that different from, very simple kind of streetwear staff reports. So kind of a lot of variations on a theme, but not much difference in style or substance. So I went, looking for a staff report that is not a staff report. So I went to the Spencer Museum of Art at the University of Kansas for some inspiration, since I was supposed to be, using art to research things. And here's what I come up with. So using design thinking, in addition to style boards, I created mood boards, which are showing different things that inspired my avant-garde staff reports that create a mood or a feeling. So I looked at pieces of art at the Spencer Museum, and they had lots of pieces of art that were collages or had lots of symbols. And that made me think of layering of things, and how can you very simply get a lot of thought out there by just using symbols. So here's my first mood board inspired by the collages or the works of art, the more kind of complicated looking works of art at the museum. This was done by my research assistant, Savannah Wakefield, where she thought about a avant-garde or a staff report that would create a mood in that you were traveling somewhere, or maybe even a game, moving pieces around a board. The other thing that inspired me at the museum were mobiles, where things twist and turn and create different points of view depending on how you look at them. I also thought about storytelling. And there's a book called Making Shapely Fiction by Jerome Stern, which has different types of ways of telling a story. And I thought about, well, could staff reports make shapely nonfiction? And these, again, are works of art from the museum illustrating the different Stern story types, like the story about the bear at the door, or the story about a journey, or a story about a day in the life. So created a mood board like that. Here is taking a couple of different works of art at the museum, and kind of thinking very high-mindedly about staff reports, that can make us think big thoughts, like what are the long-term impacts of our decisions today. So this one piece of art, Haunted by the Ghosts of Our Own Making, is a dinner table that is set, and we see these kind of skeletons in the background, and that this work of art is about the impact of chemicals on our food supply. So, being very, very highbrow and high-minded about our staff reports. So I kind of came back around to the mobile. And so what does this make us think about? Well, I'm betting that all of you at some point, and probably repeatedly, have used the words, well, we need to balance interests, or we need to balance the rights of the community with the rights of individual property owners. So that's why this mobile piece of art kept coming back to me and ringing true for me, is that there's probably something here of actually showing, illustrating through a piece of art how we are trying to balance interests, balance values, balance individual rights and community rights. And so that's why this mobile piece of art kind of kept resonating with me. So here's my mobile staff report that I created. So this is an avant-garde staff report, and yes, it is avant-garde. It is not realistic. I am not advocating that you create mobiles out of each and every application you get. This is supposed to be sparking your imagination. So I do not literally think we should be making staff reports that are mobiles, but hang in there with me. So this is actually based on an application that was made here in Lawrence, Kansas. The property owner wanted to go from a residential zoning to a commercial zoning. And the city's future land use plan actually called for the site to be medium density residential in the future. At the very bottom of the staff report, you can see that there are scales representing, here's a decision point. So it's time to make a decision. But up at the top, up here is actually the beginning of the application, where we have in the past, the site used to be the place for a mobile home park. And then right at the moment, presently, it's vacant, but you can see the roads that would go in between the mobile homes. And then we have the future land use plan, which calls for this to be medium density residential, some townhomes, things like that. And then we have here the actual proposal. So the application is for commercial to build a Menards. So if you're not familiar with Menards, it's a place where you can buy lumber and a gallon of milk. And so this is the application. Should the city approve a Menards in this location? And so kind of thinking about balancing things, I went and looked to a framework that is actually in a book by Frederick Jarvis called Site Planning and Communities Design for Great Neighborhoods. And he shows balancing different values, balancing things like excitement and safety, convenience and separation, relatedness and identity, tradition and innovation, affordability and luxury. I think you can see here affordability, there's a cent sign, and then luxury, there's a dollar sign. So balancing these things, and there's lightning bolts meaning excitement. Unity or variety. And so here's all of those different things that you might think about. Do we as a community want to stick with what it is now, which is a lower density residential? Do we want to stick with our future land use plan, which shows it as medium density residential? Or do we want to approve changing our land use plan to be commercial? I then thought, this is all going to get filtered through things that regularly appear in our decision making because we're in a democracy. And so we're going to end up with different values like accountability and representation, efficiency or effectiveness, social equity, diversity, justice, and individual rights. So we're going to be balancing all these things. It's going to be filtered through our public interest and our commitment to the public interest. And at the end will be the decision. So what to decide? Menards, future land use plan, or something else. So there's the staff report as a mobile. So what I did was, as I worked with these focus groups of planning commissions across the country, I tested out these different avant-garde staff reports to see if it sparked any ideas with how the planning commissioners would want to see staff reports in the future. So I had a bunch of different avant-garde staff reports in addition to the mobile. I had some videos, short video and a long video staff report. I created an ebook. I created a fancy newsletter, which you can see here is my kind of avant-garde fancy newsletter where I took, oh gosh, I think this was maybe like 50 pages long staff report and put it into just what I'm calling a fancy newsletter. Also tried out a very minimalist staff report, and then a game board, and then a collage staff report. So kind of putting all of this together and seeing what these planning commissions thought. So I tested these out with planning commissions. So there were actually two in Glenn County, Georgia. They had two planning commissions. One was on the mainland, and one was for the islands there along the coast in Glenn County. And then went and used this with the San Francisco Bay Conservation and Development Commission. Worked with the Planning and Zoning Commission for the City of Liberty, Missouri, the City of Calistoga, California, Hutchinson, Kansas, Topeka, Kansas, which we'll hear from Bill here in a second, the City of Linden, Utah, and then actually with the City Council in the City of Staten, Oregon. So I kind of, went anywhere that somebody would invite me to come work with their planning commission. And I showed them ahead of time the avant-garde staff reports and asked them to reflect on them, and then come to the planning commission study session. And I essentially interviewed them and had the planning commission and the planners as a focus group telling me about, what they would like to see in the way of staff reports in the future. In addition to these focus groups, I also conducted interviews with planning commissioners and planners in Colorado, North Carolina, New York, and Pennsylvania. So what were my findings from these focus groups? I'll talk more about all of these findings in a second, but what I thought was particularly telling was actually what I heard from a planning commissioner in Calistoga, California. And he said, I'm not so sure how using all of this art was helpful for us, but I think it helped you, but really don't get into this art stuff. And so that made me think about how, well, the Spencer Museum of Art and the Integrated Arts Research Initiative really was wanting to see whether art could be used as a research method and whether it could help researchers. And so I thought, maybe I should look at some results of my research in terms of myself as the experiment, myself as the research subject. How did this exercise of looking at all these staff reports and looking at how can I turn a staff report into a piece of art, what I'm calling an avant-garde staff report, but turning it into a piece of art, how did that change my thinking about staff reports? So I'm going to go through that, and then we can have our Topeka case study, and then I'll talk some more about the findings of my research, what I've gathered from all of these different focus groups. So my own thinking. So here's where, just on a whiteboard, I started thinking through how to create my, kind of pieces of art staff reports. And I first started out with, well, what are some organizing frameworks that I can kind of imagine turning into a piece of art? And so, like I said, with the Mobile staff report, I started off with Jarvis's kind of wheel of qualities of desirable places to live. And how would we, Jarvis is indicating that somehow we should be able to balance all of these things. And if we can attend to these different values, these qualities of desirable places, we should be able to create better places. So I could imagine this framework as a mobile, as somehow a piece of art, and start to think about putting an application or a staff report into this kind of framework. I also thought back to the sustainability prism, which is in the classic textbook of urban land use planning, which is using livability, equity, economy, and ecology. And how you're supposed to use the sustainability prism is you're supposed to balance all these things to get to the heart of the sustainability prism. And so I could kind of imagine some sort of piece of art out of this, and how would you put a staff report into this kind of piece of art. So I had the wheel, I had the pyramid, I had, well, we could think about staff reports as just a timeline of, just like how that we regularly talk about balancing interests. We all the time hear from citizens about, the good old days, or, what used to be there was X. Why can't we have, X again? And so I thought, the past is very much in people's minds, and maybe that is kind of a choice. If we could go back to the past, is that a choice we could make, or a choice of, well, why not, we could just leave things the way they are, or we could look to the future. And so I thought like a timeline could be an interesting organizing structure. And then I thought about the traditional staff report, which is very much trying to be objective, to have the facts and have the analysis. And it very much tries to separate the analysis from the facts, or opinion from the facts, and be very objective. And so I thought, well, that's, a framework. And so here's my sketch of where I first started to imagine creating a work of art that was a staff report that was a mobile. And so you can see where I'm, trying to create this place, and I've got past, present, I've got the future land use plan, and then I've got the actual proposal itself, and then I've got Jarvis's wheel, and kind of creating a piece of art out of that. And then here's my sketch of the collage that I thought, well, I could create a staff report out of a collage where, you know, maybe I've got the city's motto, and that's what the city wants to be proud of. And so, you know, let's have that big city logo or motto out there that is our touchstone. I tried to think of symbols. I mean, there are pieces of art that are all symbols, and if you know what the symbols mean, then you can really, you know, a lot of what's going on. And so I thought, could I create a piece of art that has symbols that have meaning to people? And then I can do things like maps, or maybe have a graph that shows, well, how much of the proposal meets the requirements of the plan. Could I have, like, here are options for the Planning Commission, and I turn the dial towards what option I'm recommending, things like that. So that was kind of my thinking through this. So you can certainly see how I got to this mobile. And then here's a game board I put together. And so this actually is, here's the proposed location. The star is the proposed location of the future Menards. And then going from east to west is the different land uses around this site, from a major intersection to a Home Depot, to the site, to a park, to a neighborhood, to a school. So this is the context of the proposal. And then these are different symbols of what's important to the city of Lawrence, to the Lawrence community. They really value, downtown. They value large trees. They value not overbuilding retail space. They value what's the connection, or how will commercial be next to residential. And so these are kind of symbols of things that are important to the Lawrence community. Limestone, prairie style architecture, the wetlands that are nearby. And then, like, how, you know, if you're from Lawrence, you know what these things mean. And then down here is, we could go to back to the past, where it's affordable housing as a mobile home park. We could go, just leave it kind of vacant like it is, or we could do Menards, or we could do the future land use plan. And so depending on which of these symbols mean the most to you will then dictate which of these pieces get put up where this star is. So this as kind of the game. And then here is the collage, where I want to try to have, here's everything in one look. You just look at this and here's the staff report. But then there are layers of information that if you want to dig deeper, you can get into the layers. And then I was trying to create a template to make it easier for staff to do the report, making it more plug and play. And that's where I have, so the choices are maybe, yes, no, or conditions. And so maybe is yellow. So in this request and recommendation, you move down what color things are. Conditions are blue. And so here's the blue, and some conditions could be about preserving the trees on the site, things like that. And so you move down the blue, which is whatever the conditions are, if you're going to say yes, but conditions. And then in the background is the piece of art from the museum of the ghosts of our own makings, you know, reminding us that these decisions make a difference. And this is also from the collection at the Spencer Museum of Art, where somebody is pointing to, what does this represent? And the piece of art is saying, well, what do you represent? So it's kind of saying, you know, with these staff reports, what do you represent? And Planning Commission, you making this decision, what do you represent with the decision that you're making? Okay, so So Bill, hopefully you're all warmed up. So that was how my thinking was influenced by this process. So Bill, how about Topeka?
Thanks, Bonnie. Hopefully you all can hear me, if not see me. If you can just picture, I'm sitting on a nice street bench looking at that statue and the cars and the buildings of our downtown. That's, you can, if you get that visual, that's all you need. So I was a little unnerved by Bonnie opening up the planner brain and the way we think, or how she approached it, but it tells us so much, and I think our experience in Topeka, um, again, is right along those same lines with how people think, how we think, and so I'm gonna talk about our evolution of our staff report, and then talk a little bit about the brain, a little bit about what we are doing here in this time of COVID to deal with our getting our information out in our staff reports, and then talk a little bit about who is this for and some of the conclusions that we have found. So I noticed in Bonnie's all those words that came up in that one graphic that other than boring, there was a close second or third where informative or information was pretty big. It wasn't well. It was bigger than time suck, which I fancied my staff saying, but information is what we're really trying to do here. And when I first started doing staff reports, whether it was before Topeka and when I got here, so much was, so much pointed me as a staff planner to write something that would stand up to legal scrutiny. And I don't know, I started in California. I started working a lot with environmental law, CEQA, and then and very high growth areas. And so a lot of stuff could be challenged. And for whatever reason, that was my upbringing. As I wrote a legal scrutinous document. And so it was a mix of facts and analysis. It was meant to be read. It was meant to be read by a court or a judge or a lawyer, to say, hey, it's there. And I soon learned as I moved on and kind of evolved, particularly when I became less of a staff planner, more of the supervisor, manager, and you begin to think differently. And so the next evolution of the staff report was that decision maker. I'm calling it the decision maker staff report, and that's where you realized you were trying to help the people above you, whether it's the planning commission or your governing body, make decisions. So you want to get them information, and you want to get it to them and get them options and alternatives. And you want to do this in a little more of a structured way than just throwing it all together. So we separated. I started to go with our staff to separate more of the facts out from the analysis. I'm sure a lot of you do this, but it's and I'll talk about this in a second. It's kind of a left to the right brain, literally, as you read a document. But you set it up in the beginning with what Bonnie described nicely, as a cover letter that kind of summarizes everything. But then, if you're one of those folks who wants to get into it, whether it's legally or just want to know more of the facts, the next section, you want to know what the data is. You want to know the level of service of traffic, and what does the stormwater report say, and you want to know what the surrounding land use is and the zoning. So you want to know that information, But then you get to the next section of the staff report, which is you want to do an analysis, and you want to be a little more creative in your thinking. I mean, because not everybody can take facts and just extrapolate to a conclusion. So we made it a better reading document. It was really helped to, again, separate that kind of that left brain, right brain function that we all have, and appeal to people who have different learning aptitudes. So when we got involved with Bonnie here recently, though, we pushed it one more step. So we evolved into what I call the influencer, where we began to add another component, which was a video component to our staff report, where it was also audible. And so you could not just read, but you could see the visualizations, but also hear how they all go together. And we've started that in the last couple months, and staff, and we took baby steps. We are nowhere near the mobile stage, but our baby step was simply, and I think anybody can do this, is if you want, is to, if you do PowerPoints for your planning commission, you just simply add audio to the PowerPoint, and you do more of a summary of what you were going to present anyway to the planning commission, and you add that audio component. You can get a little more fancier than that, but that's the basic thing you're doing. And what we've kind of, and I guess I'll get into that, into the how the left brain, right brain thing, but people, we all comprehend differently. Some are readers, some are visual, some are verbal. We all aren't the same, and some of us want those facts up front. Some of us have more of an imagination, and so we all have to be kind of stoked a little differently. So, but we're not. So we're trying to appeal to both sides of how we think, because when we think left, right, they really think together. Those things work together. There's no just, oh, we should just provide all left brain dominant type of learning presentations. No, they go together, and your planning commission, your public, your staff all have different ways of learning and comprehending. So I think that's the big take as we added that influencer element, and I call it influencer mainly because we're trying to get to not just inform decision makers, but influence as well, not just the decision maker, but the people who are influencing the decision maker. So so let's talk about how we get more into that. The next term here, asynchronous meetings. Some of you have heard that. I never heard of it until a couple months ago. We were looking at ways to do better public meetings in the time of virtualness, and we heard this idea really out of necessity, which was, well, we're not having people attend our meetings in person. We are getting very little response to the remote meetings, the day of the meetings. People were not, other than the applicant, were not really signing up for those. So we looked for another solution, and we said, well, what if we put our staff report, this influencer, out there ahead of the meeting, because, and that's what asynchronous really means. We're doing one thing before another thing. Currently, we have a synchronous process where everything all the public is asked to come to a meeting and make their comments, or they're asked to send in their comments, and it's all delivered and decided on, and there's all the back and forth is at that one meeting. It's a synchronous meeting. Asynchronous means you can put your staff report out there, you can put the materials, whether it's a video, whether it's maps and tables and those sort of things earlier in the process. So say 10 days ahead of your public hearing. And then people, the citizens can view those at their own time. They could view them in their pajamas. They can view them over breakfast. They can view them whenever the spirit moves them. And not only that, but they can comment and they can ask questions, and staff can filter those. They can respond to them all before the meeting, and the planning commissioners can all see this. They can all, in fact, there's a way for us, at least, to see which planning commissioners actually looked at the staff report or the video or viewed the comments, which is kind of cool, because we all have our ideas of who really does that. So there is a software out there, People Speaks. I encourage you, if you're interested in something like an asynchronous meeting, to try it out. We are kicking it off this month. So I do not have any feedback yet, but I have spoken to other cities that have done it, and we have an idea and what we hope to get out of it, which I'll talk about here in a second. The other type of asynchronous process that is a alternative to the traditional staff report would be a story map. You heard a lot of the word story and some of what Bonnie was talking about. And some of you probably have used this or are using it. It's an Esri tool through GIS platform. But you don't have to be too GIS-y to even use this. It is simply a really neat way, and we have used this. We've used this with our neighborhood plans. We haven't used it with our staff reports that have gone to a planning commission for decision, but we could, it's just another way for people to view your staff report in a more summarized visual way, and then add comments and feedback at the end, and they do it on their own time. So I would encourage you also to look at that. But this asynchronous meeting is becoming more of a necessity in our times, and it may be, like many things that are becoming a necessity now, that's something that is just a more preferred way. So who is this for? Why would this be a good thing? No, the planning commission, our planning commission, they're pretty engaged with us as staff, but the one thing that we continue to try and get is an engaged citizenry. So if there's any way we can reach out to citizens and have more views, more hits on our staff report, that is a good thing, because that will be a constructive comments that can come in early, that can unconfuse people, so that they're not coming with preconceived notions when they get to the meeting. That was a huge factor. Citizens, again, pretty obvious. These are modern times. This is not everybody can come to a 6 o'clock meeting at night. The people we keep seeing at our meetings are the same sort of folks over and over. It's not very diverse. We want to reflect our demographics in our community, and we know we have more people, whether they have families, children, do not have a lot of access to the internet, or maybe they do, but we hope from what we see in other cities that the people that actually show up and comment will reflect and mirror more of what our demographic actually is in the city. And then lastly, this notion of telling a story is where trying to think outside the box with staff reports really helps the planner. And Bonnie really hit on that a lot, is that it's really opens up the way of our thinking. And as a planner, writing a staff report is not a lot unlike telling a story, which is you have an opening, you're setting the scene, you have some character development, maybe even a plot, and then in the end you have an ending, you have a conclusion, and it might be a good one, might be a bad ending, but there is a conclusion to it, and there may be a soft ending. So really, the more we can tell the story, and it doesn't have to be that fact-based, very one size sort of fits all staff report. We're looking at providing a lot of different approaches, because people, and so here's my conclusion, people are different. They're different learners, that's for sure, and people come from different backgrounds and have different perspectives. So why wouldn't we have our staff reports and our stories have different approaches? So I think there's more to come on these efforts, but we're receiving some pretty good feedback, and I'm sure as time goes, we'll have even more to report back on. But I'll pass it back to Bonnie now, and she can delve more into her brain for you.
Well, thank you so much, Bill. It's good to kind of take all of these things that I'm talking about and show how that our avant-garde can be turned into streetwear, so to speak, and ready to wear. I wanted to kind of wrap things up with what my findings are so far are from talking to all these different planning commissions and showing them these avant-garde staff reports. And so a big finding is that a lot of the planning commissioners start off with, well, it is what it is. And that's kind of where Bill was starting off with, that, it's this legal thing. We do need the facts. We do need to have things in our files to show due process and why we made the decision we made. And so even the planning commissioners were recognizing that, yeah, that some of this detail and these facts are necessary, but maybe there are other ways of putting the package together. One thing that the planning commissioners talked about that was pretty consistent is they wanted to know what happened behind the scenes. So they wanted to know what the story was of, the applicant walks through the door. What did staff think? How did staff's thinking change over time? And how did staff get to this recommendation? So they wanted to know what happened, and they wanted to know staff's thought process. Why did staff end up with the recommendation that they ended up with? And what did staff think and consider in terms of different scenarios, different options? I also asked the planning commissioners, how do you want a staff report delivered? Video, podcast, paper, online, website. And this was something that it really varied across the country. Each planning commission was different on what they thought was the best way to get them the information and get the public the information. So speaking of Topeka, Topeka's planning commission was very gung-ho about video. And the city of Topeka has its own video crew. And so it was a natural for Topeka to start doing more with video. There were some planning commissions that hated the idea of a video staff report. They were like, who has time to sit and just listen to or watch a video? I want to be able to flip through the pages and read what I want to read or skip what I want to skip. In California, where probably a lot of people are either commuting on a train or bus or stuck in traffic, a podcast sounded more doable to them, that while you're in your car, you could listen to a staff report. And there were other planning commissioners that said, I have to have paper because that's where I write my notes. So, so in terms of how to distribute this information, it kind of depends on your community and what your planning commission is interested in. The other thing that that came up with in Topeka and the other planning commission focus groups was they really do want to hear from the public and be able to engage the public. And so if there are ways that the staff reports can be better at engaging the public and getting them the information ahead of time to head off misunderstandings. The last thing on my findings, which was something that I didn't think about, it just happened, was that by me coming and having these focus groups and talking to the planning commissioners about what is it that you want to see in your staff reports, we discovered things like there was one planning commission that had a history of not wanting a recommendation, and they had ordered their staff not to give them a recommendation. When we got together and were talking, at the end, they said, oh, you know what? I would really like to have a recommendation. Let's rethink that policy. Well, that discussion wouldn't have ever happened if I hadn't showed up and started talking about staff reports. There were other planning commissions that talked about, well, gosh, we always have multiple public hearings, and the first public hearing, the staff report is just the facts with no recommendation. And then we have another public hearing where we then get a recommendation for staff. Why do we do that? Well, it was state law. And they talked about the pros and cons and why do we do the things we do. In another community, they said, you know, we love our planning staff and their staff reports, but woof, the police department staff reports, they're awful. And there was a lot of where the planning commissions would tell their staff, you know, we think you're doing a great job. And the planners didn't know that. And it was just this great opportunity to ask, how are we doing? And the planning commission could say, you know, we like this, we don't like this, but really we do like what you're doing. And so there are benefits to just taking a break every now and then and asking your planning commission, how's it going? How do you feel about the products that we're giving you? And it really is a nice way of being able to check in, clear the air, bring up some things that maybe you didn't know, and even bringing up, hey, we think you're doing a great job. So that is the end of our presentation. We hope this sparked your imaginations. And I want to thank the Spencer Museum of Art's Integrated Arts Research Initiative for funding all of that travel that I did going to the different planning commissions, and my research assistants, Savannah Wakefield and Mary Morrison, and all those planning commissioners and planners who let me interview and talk to them, like Bill and the Topeka Planning Commission. But Christine, I think we are ready for some questions.
Sounds good. Again, folks, just type them in the chat box. Let's see, our first question is, okay, does APA recommend a model staff report template to be sent out nationwide? Or is this really sort of like I know you mentioned it's really a by community thing, but is there some kind of template available?
There is. Actually, what what prompted my research at the very beginning was that I have, as a planner, have worked in 3 different states. And it was amazing how similar the staff reports were. And so I thought, there's got to be some like universal guidance out there. I mean, why are we all planners doing these staff reports the same? And I did find that the historical root is a 1976 Planning Advisory Service report about zoning reports and how to write them. And that seems to be the root. But that has been updated over time, and there actually is a template, kind of a more modern template that's in Planning Magazine. I wrote an article about how to improve staff reports, and there's a template there that the design staff at the American Planning Association put together. And so that has a template with it. And so look up article written by me in Planning Magazine, and there's a template there. And then there's also some zoning practice written by Meck and Morris that also has a template with it as well.
Wonderful. No sense in recreating the wheel, right? This question says, we put our reports out ahead of the meeting as a PDF on our website. How is an asynchronous meeting different from just putting information out ahead of time?
Aha. I'll try and answer that. Yes, we all do that, but can people actually interact with you as a staff? Is it an easier, can they give you feedback before the meeting as well? And can there be that back and forth? So what we have done is, again, by putting, we all put the agenda out there ahead of time, but it is further broken down by a video. And that's the main difference with us. And it's either broken down by a video, or you can break it down a little. It takes the staff report and presents it. You take your presentation and also put that out there. So if you're putting your presentation out there and there's a way that is more of a condensed form of your more comprehensive staff report, and you're allowing a way to have the public view that and give you and the plan commissioners feedback, or allow them to ask questions upon reviewing, then you're doing that. So that was the main difference for us.
Okay, thank you. Next question. This one's for Bonnie. Out of all the staff reports that you have seen, which one, in your opinion, were most cleverly created?
That is a good question. I'm struggling with this because none of them are really that creative, I have to say. And actually, I've also done things where I have turned my students loose on creating realistic but modern staff reports. And they've done some things that I think are very doable and are more creative. Some of them have done things where, like the part of the staff report that maybe tells you the history of a site, they've turned that into a timeline with illustrated photos over time. They've done that. They have done things where instead of just listing the policies that are from the plan and applying those, they pulled out, well, what are the values being expressed by these policies, and then which parts of the application are getting us these values and which ones aren't. The typical thing of where on the staff report where you say the north, south, east, west, what are the land uses north, south, east, west, what are the zoning districts north, south, east, west of the site. I mean, that shows up in almost every single staff report. Well, students will take that and they will show a photo of the site and then illustrate north, south, east, west with photos of what is to the north, what's to the south, what's to the east, what's to the west, and showing those photos. So you're seeing, you're not just reading to the north is single family homes, you're seeing a photo of what's actually north of the site. So they've done things like that. And then kind of connecting video, that part of the staff report where you're giving people like a tour of the site, and you might do that with text. I've had students take a GoPro and they go walk the site or they drive around the site and video it so that you're actually getting a tour of the site. And I know other cities are now using drones to be able to do video of sites. And so it's kind of taking the things that are in a typical staff report, but then using photos, using video, using our maps to bring those things to light. And I also think that some students have done things like create an infographic where you're showing, here's the application and here's how it performs on the comprehensive plans, policies and goals, but you're seeing it in an infographic. That here's what it's hitting on, here's where it's missing things, and it's really easy to see that.
Thanks.
Bonnie,
Mm-hmm.
I would be remiss if I didn't bring this up, but my favorite avant-garde staff report that your student did for me was
Yes.
one where he did it was a documentary and he did it in an English accent.
Yes.
And it was and you might think that's kind of okay, what's the big deal? But if I paid attention, I mean, it really makes it sound like they know what they're saying, and so the credibility was immediate.
Yes. Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah. Yes, I had a student who did a video staff report, and mind you, he's not British.
Right.
But he used kind of a BBC British accent to narrate it, and it did make you think, gosh, this guy really knows what he's talking about.
FYI, everyone, Bonnie's article in Planning Magazine was from March 2017, and I guess it's in a downloadable template form from the article. So March 2017 for those that are trying to locate it. This next question, yeah, let's go with Bill for this one. We have more questions regarding the asynchronous meeting. So how does it affect your lead time on staff report development? The person asking the question says, we often are pressured to accept items up to the last minute, and I think video development, etc., would make it even more difficult to do that. Could you comment?
Yeah, that's a big worry of staff. My staff had. They are working right up to the last minute. We get our staff reports out 10 days in advance of the meeting. And so we have a day there where we can then also put a video out roughly about 6 or 7 days before the meeting. If things change, if some, and I'm going to tell you the way we do the video, it's not that time consuming because you're already preparing a presentation for the Planning Commission. All you're simply doing is audibleizing that and further condensing it. So so that's work you already would have had to have done, but you do have to script it out a little better. But if things come in, information changes, we do have a caveat to that. So clearly we're trying to engage sooner. And if you do that, yes, a question or a piece of information could come in that was not contemplated. And so we then, the night of the meeting or leading up to the meeting, we would be, those things would be shared already with our planning commission because of the platform that we're on. They can see it, they can read it. There's no additional sharing, but I think what you're getting at is if the developer or the applicant changes anything, how do you deal with that? And I'll be honest, we haven't dealt with that yet. We're telling folks to be very mindful of our timelines, but yes, we haven't come across something that the application has changed of any dramatic way. So in true asynchronous form, there should be this back and forth of free flowing of information from your staff report to the questions that get asked, and that the planning commission is seeing those things. But you're right. You have to have some lead time to do that.
All right, this one here is for Bonnie. Do you have a list somewhere of best practices for staff reports? There's a couple people asking questions about whether or not you publish the results and recommendations, or you have example reports available somewhere.
Yeah, so well, that Planning Magazine article, there's the article that I mentioned in the presentation from our first research project, that's in the Journal of the American Planning Association, the unexamined staff report. It has with it a rundown of kind of inventorying the things that we found in existing staff reports and what seemed to work well. So that article, the one from Planning Magazine, and then if anybody does want to email me, I can give you the resources that I put together for the Planning Commission focus groups, which have examples of staff reports. It has the avant-garde staff reports, and it just has a bunch of different examples in there. And I have that on a link that I can email that link to people, and then you can kind of explore. I've put out there the student staff reports that seem to be particularly good, and a little bit different and more creative, but very doable at the same time. So
Wonderful.
yeah, just email me and I can get you that link to all of those goodies.
Thank you. Let's see, Bill, let's run back to you again. Could you share some insight, and this is again in regards to the asynchronous meetings, please share some insight on developer perspective of losing competitive advantage by making information so widely available and over an extended period to a decision vote. So the person asking the question says, as a planner, I support greater public participation. However, my experience has been that developers or businesses, decision makers may have a different take, as in don't make it harder on developers in development by enabling opposition time to organize. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, no, good question. So I think what we've experienced here is this hasn't, right, you haven't really added anything to the developer to do. Like, they don't need to get us anything sooner than they would have already. So they're not out from that perspective. But your point being, you're putting you're giving more time for this quote unquote opposition or folks to take shots at the proposal. And I would say that you have that all as soon as they submit their application, it's a public record. So it's already in that sphere that anybody can view it. What we are trying to convince the developer, although we don't have to really convince at this point, people, if they have something worthwhile, they want to get a clear communication message out there anyway. So what we're trying to have them understand is that this is beneficial to you. You want to get your message out there. You want to get less confusion. I would say in 9 times out of 10, when we get to that planning commission meeting and things blow up, like that's our ultimate, my staff and my direction is we do not want things, we want to have, we may not all agree, but we don't want to have it be because there's so much confusion. So this can help unconfuse, that is not a word, but that's my word, unconfuse the whole situation of what they're proposing, who it impacts, what the true proposal details are. And yes, we think that's a benefit. So we think getting it out ahead of that Monday night meeting that we have here is a lot better than waiting for people to sit there for a week out in the public to wonder and ask these questions and then start to the rumor mill out there. So when it gets time to the Monday night meeting, this is turned into something it's not. And I think it benefits us all to get the information out there sooner. So that's what we're trying to convince the developer on. And I to this point, it hasn't been a hard sell.
Do the staff reports and videos, are they used for all items or just major decisions?
Actionable decisions, I would say. For instance, we've just used it up till now for zoning and some subdivision stuff, but this next week, we're going to have a neighborhood plan that amends our comprehensive plan. So we are going to use it for that.
And then let's see, here's another one for you. Is the close of public comments delayed in Topeka to allow for more comments or to address project concerns? Or are you planning to stick with closing it out and the published hearing date?
Let me see if I can understand. So I guess I'm not quite following that.
Let's read it. Let me read
Try it
through it
again.
again. So is the close of public comments, so the close of the public hearing delayed in Topeka to allow for more comments or to address project concerns? Or is it a strict, this is the hearing date, this is the closing date, and that's it?
Got it. Traditionally, the Planning Commission does not like to defer stuff here. So while they have kept the public hearing open, so to speak, for another for more input to another month, our expectation is it's going to be decided on that night. And so we are better off getting ahead of the curve there and getting the comments and interaction ahead of that meeting, as opposed to hoping if there is some confusion, they can delay it. With the last thing we want to do is walk in and with a situation where it's going to add time on the developer side. That doesn't help anybody. So yeah, we do try and close it out that night with the hopes of we gave everybody enough lead time.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question. Bonnie, this is a good one. Have you ever looked internationally at other reports, at other types of staff reports? Are they more interesting or different? Do they even do staff reports? Have you looked at that?
I have looked at staff reports in England, and they are very similar and very much where they try to completely, really try to keep to, here's the facts and here's the analysis, and it's very pretty, not dry, shall I say. But it is eerie how similar we are. But I would say that they're even more so in the realm of, just the facts, ma'am. But that's my next project, is to look international, and I'm starting with England.
Great. Well, it's time to close up shop. Bonnie and Bill, thank you both for joining us today, and the APA Kansas chapter for hosting. There's a lot of good information in here. Again, we're recording this. It'll be up on our YouTube channel probably Monday. And I'll be posting here shortly a PDF copy of this slide deck on our webcast webpage, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. So be sure to head over there to download that copy and to register for all of our upcoming sessions. So again, Bonnie and Bill, thank you for joining us today. This was great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Everyone have a great weekend, and we will talk next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.